Hello, everyone. We're to our last video, Module 7. Uh, I guess so. Just a few announcements. So, in this class, Module 7 is the last module. We'll be covering the rest of the content, and then you'll have that last 8 week just to take that final exam. So this week you can go through the module material, through the video that I posted on narrative. Read the gliding text chapters, the last 3, and then study for the exam and take it by July 15th. I guess with that being said, though, in this video, I'm going to share some of my discussion board reactions, as well as a little bit about the midterm exam and about the final exam, and then just a little bit about chapters 17 and 18. I did the video on chapter 16 narrative, but yeah, 17 and 18, I'll just kind of some minimal thoughts there. All right, so I'll start with my discussion board reactions. I felt like it was really normal that there are a lot of different reactions to the various theories, just everyone's different, everyone's unique, everyone's going to resonate with different, theories and different, approaches to counseling, because I think a lot of it has to do with our personal experience, our personal values, our personal, I guess we just got done with the genogram assignment and just our way of being raised and the values and those traditions. So it's really normal. So I guess a few thoughts here is sometimes people said in their next steps they would read more. They want to read more and research more. So I want to encourage you to go a step beyond that. Read more what? What are you going to be reading? You might just say, book chapters or articles, but I really think, if you really want to get into a theory, it's pretty helpful to go to some of the original sources. So going to the foundational figures in that theory, reading some of their original work. It might seem it's kind of dated, but that'll give you, just kind of like, okay, here's the original viewpoint. And then going to maybe some articles of more like how people are applying it, in this, in 2022 or so, or near 2022. I think that can be helpful to kind of see, okay, here's the foundational framework that the original, founder of the theory developed, and then here's how it's kind of altered and developed. So yeah, that's one thought there of going to those original sources. Some of you have kind of talked about maybe feeling constrained a little bit, or constrained about having to choose one theory, and in the end, you don't have to choose one theory. It's totally normal to integrate multiple theories together. I think maybe it came across because I do believe that it's really important to have a deep knowledge of theory, though. So, and it's kind of hard to do that with like 5 different theories at the same time, especially, as a grad student, kind of learning a lot about different theories. So I really think that the key to developing, an intentional approach is that you really learn maybe about 1 or 2 theories in depth before you just start pulling techniques from other theories. Kind of basically helps you, like, how can you make sure that whatever techniques, whatever interventions you're using on the surface with the client, why you are. You have a bigger picture of like what's going on with this client, what's the process of counseling according to this theory, and then how are my interventions playing into that bigger why. I think that's the main key. Sometimes I just kind of see people who are almost groundless. They don't really have a foundation, but they're just doing techniques from a lot of different things. But it's like, why are you though? What's your bigger picture of why it's helpful? Not just from your own perspective, but from a theoretical or an empirical base. Because the ACA Code of Ethics talks about, that we need to be based in theory or evidence-based practice, it says, or theory or evidence-based practice. So once again, the key is to be intentional and thoughtful of why. Why are these techniques fitting back into a theoretical, framework? With all that being said, though, I think, and some of you mentioned this, but remember that the core counseling skills are essential to all approaches, all theories, all, evidence-based practices, because they help build a healing relationship. So sometimes when people start to get more into theory, they start to kind of drop some of the core counseling skills. And that means that alliance may not be built as strongly. And as we saw from the common factors research, that the strength of the alliance is actually what's most important. The approach and the theoretical, interventions, that's only like 15%, as Gladding said and wrote about the common factors earlier. 15% of like the positive change is really only about that, that intervention model. therapeutic alliance is double that. 30% of the predicted success or predicted, growth in the client just comes from that area, the strength of the alliance. So I guess what I'm saying is don't forget the core counseling skills, no matter what approach, those core listening and attending and really, facilitating a space, that healing space is essential. All right. Let's see. I'm just looking over some additional thoughts here. I think overall, I just appreciated what was brought up, that everyone, mentioned that it's a continuous learning process. Absolutely. That's the field we're in. And I hope you continue after graduation and after this class to just continue to grow and to learn and to, really, some of you have talked about how you have those book lists just saved up for once you're kind of done with the classwork, then you can go back to some of those when you have a little more time. Great. Keep that process learning. And one piece that I kind of wanted to challenge, sometimes it's, solution focused brief. So the brief approaches kind of basically state that, we don't need a lot of time to work with clients, or maybe we don't have a lot of time. So we need to kind of get rolling with making those changes. And sometimes, so I guess just one example, this is about an individual counseling approach, but so I guess the main question is, do we need approaches that are specifically deemed short-term in order to be helpful with short-term environments? So person-centered counseling isn't always necessarily seen as a brief approach, but even in my career counseling work and my individual mental health counseling work, sometimes I only see clients once or twice, and that's it. But I'm working from a person-centered approach. But sometimes just that one session was all the clients need. They needed to have a space where they could make sense of their situation and they can move forward, and they kind of got the insights they needed in order to move forward. So even some of those approaches that aren't deemed short or brief can still have a brief impact, or I guess not just a brief impact, but an important impact in a brief period of time. So just one thing that I wanted to throw out there, that it just, I think all of the approaches can have some pretty quick impacts, not for every single client, obviously, but sometimes just the clients just need a certain kind of space or a certain paradigm to kind of get jumpstart to spark their progress. Okay, I think that'll cover the discussion board reactions, but once again, I felt like everyone engaged pretty well. There's obviously a lot of differences this week, but I appreciated that. I appreciated that there's a lot that came up for people. So just some thoughts on the midterm exam, because this might help you for the final exam. So some people kind of struggled with the question about the meta-ethical principles, which was not a meta-ethical principle, and maleficence is not a medical ethical principle. Non-maleficence is a meta-ethical principle, but maleficence is basically saying do harm. Non-maleficence, do no harm. So I guess I just bring that up because make sure that you're reading clearly the questions and all of the answers. Because sometimes there's just little things that are you need to attend to the details. And this just kind of has to do with professional identity. The IAMFC, so the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors, is the division for marriage and family counselors. That's their professional body that supports them. AAFT is for family therapists. So counselors and therapists, I think we're getting into the language, but the therapist and counselor are not the same necessarily organization. We work with each other a lot. We do similar work, but specifically as a professional association and a professional body to support the work of marriage and family counselors, it's the IAMFC. And that is a division of ACA, but ACA isn't necessarily overseeing specifically, the work of marriage and family counselors. That division under ACA is specific to the marriage and family counselors. Let's see. So most got this, but I just really want to clarify. This was, I guess, just circling back to one of my very first video, is that remember that the family or the couple relationship is the client when you're doing family and couple work. So it's not like, if you have a couple that you have two different clients, it's not really seen that way. It's the couple relationship, the couple together is the client. The family, whether it's 10 people, that the 10 people wouldn't be 10 individual clients. It's the family client. So yeah, please, remember that, because that gets you oriented into this family and systems counseling space. And it really impacts, the ethics and how you view, how you might respond to ethical dilemmas, how you might respond to the family unit, like being aware of triangles, that's not getting caught up into the triangles of the family. So yeah, I think that's sufficient for now. I guess one more thing, the common factors. So the common factors are like these curative factors of what works in counseling. So Steve Miller is, he's done a lot of the research on these common factors. So it's basically saying, what are the common elements in counseling work that work regardless of the approach or of the theory or of the interventions? Like what are the commonalities among all this? So that's what the common factors are. So the research I referenced that earlier in this video already, of the different percentages of what are those curative factors, with the relationship being the most significant. That's in the control of the counselor. It's not necessarily control, but that's in the relationship with the client. But yeah, there's also extra therapeutic characteristics that, just things outside of counseling that aren't even a part of our purview at all, that are part of those common factors as well. But yeah, there's some confusion of the common factors. So I encourage you to look back on that. Okay, so the final exam. The final exam is due, like I said earlier, on July 15th. So just note that that's different. So usually assignments have been due on Saturdays, but this is due on Friday because that's the last day of this 8-week term, and it has to be, submitted at that point. It's the very last day we can't have it submitted. So yeah, this week through the 4th of July through the 9th of July. So the 9th is the Saturday a week. That week, you have the content for, chapter 16 through 18, but then the next week is all just reserved for the final exam and wrapping up the class. There's 39 questions on the final exam. You'll have 2 minutes. Well, I guess a little over that. I'm giving you 1 hour and 20 minutes for this exam. And it's over all of the chapters. It's a cumulative exam, but once again, it's up to 3 attempts. You can take it up to 3 times. Your highest score will be submitted. It's open book. And I just encourage you to look over the Gladding book in particular to prepare, look over, some of the module information, 1 through 7, as you prepare. I get that that's pretty open-ended and broad, but once again, because you have the 3 attempts in the open book, I didn't feel like I wasn't going to add a study guide or anything, because I feel like you kind of have the resources available to you. But if you have questions, please reach out. But yeah, the 39 questions. Okay, and the last thing I want to cover in this video is just 2 brief thoughts on chapter 17 and 18. The video, I posted another lecture video specifically on narrative to help you with that theory, just share some thoughts there. But chapter 17 on research and assessment, and chapter 18 on, working with substance abuse, child abuse, and domestic violence. So the main thing that I want to talk about with chapter 17 on assessment, I actually am not going to get into the research side. I'll leave that just for Gladding and for your other class on research. But the assessment, I feel like the example on page 375 of the Gladding text can be kind of helpful. There's different methods used to assess families. Some of them are more formal, some are more informal, but the main idea is what do you need to know? What do you want to know about a family? What will help you kind of get oriented to the family to start to initiate that work together? An assessment at the same time isn't just to start work. It can be used at different points throughout the work with clients, but usually there's a larger assessment with a lot of organizations, counseling organizations at the start, just to kind of get a lot of the background information. But I would encourage you to think about, what do you need to know? What do you believe you need to know? Maybe based on your some of the theories that are resonating with you, what would be important to know? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I just kind of need to go in and just kind of experientially make sense of what's going on. But some of you might kind of have the inclination to there are certain pieces of information that would be helpful. But page 375 gives an example of a family assessment form. And this is more of an informal one that you can use. It just kind of goes on the name, the occupations of the different family members, the life stage they're in, family of origin information, external source of stress and support, etc. So it starts, I think it can give you some good ideas and maybe some important things to be looking into. One thing about it is it doesn't really go into culture very much, so usually, there can be sections of going into, what are the cultural traditions? What are the family of origin traditions? I guess it does a little bit of the family origin, but just what are those cultural factors and contextual factors that are important to them based on their social identities, based on, some of those, it could be religion, whatever it is. But I'd encourage you to always be attending to culture, because that will allow you to kind of enter the framework of the client to make sure that there's not, cultural gaps between your understanding and where the client's at. Okay, so just some things to think about there. In chapter 18, a lot was covered here, but I really just thought it was the figures on page 393 and 394 were pretty interesting. So there's the power and control wheel. Basically, there's patterns of violence that are utilized in relationships, from intimidation to emotional abuse to using children to using male privilege, using coercion and threats, etc. I feel like that wheel could kind of maybe help you have an ear and have like an insight into what to maybe be looking for when it comes to that power and control and violence there. But then the nonviolence wheel on page 394 could kind of help you, like, here's what you can get to for equality in relationships. So yeah, what does that look like? So some of the ideas are, respect. So how what can help you kind of see that there's a respectful relationship developing? Honesty and accountability, trust and support, economic partnership, negotiation and fairness, etc. So I think those two wheels really kind of stood out to me as kind of demonstrating, the contrast or the continuum of kind of typical behaviors or patterns when there's violence involved. And once again, violence more general, physical violence, sexual violence, it could be neglect, whatever it is, whatever form of abuse, I guess, is occurring, you can kind of start to apply some of this to it. It's not a comprehensive wheel, a comprehensive continuum, but I think it can start to help you look at several of the important things when it comes to power, control, equality. Yeah, that's the main thing. I wanted to keep this video brief. I could talk for forever on these chapters, but just because I've already posted the other video, I want to keep this one as brief as possible. So that's the basics of what I wanted to cover this week. But overall, I guess this is goodbye for these videos. So I appreciate the really fast moving term we had. I know some of you mentioned that as well, that it's just like flying by, covering so much information. And yeah, it really was. But I hope that this overview can kind of give you some grounding to know, how can I work with families? Some of you don't really want to at this time. That's okay. But, even with individuals, how can I use these frameworks of family work to better understand them? But I wish you all the best. I really do. And I appreciate our work together. If you have questions, if you have just, you need to chat about the class, you need to chat about the exam, whatever it is, I'd be happy to talk. I'm still obviously going to be available for Zoom or via email, whatever works. But I wish you the best. And I hoped, I guess, that our paths will cross again and that we'll run into each other. But thanks for a great semester. And that's it for now.